All right, my friends. Hello, hello. This is Julie Santiago. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is AKEMI. Okay.
I am joined by our amazing client, AKEMI, who graduated. How long ago did you graduate, babe?
Uh, it was like a year ago, I think now.
Uh-huh.
I think.
Uh-huh. So, y'all, you're joining us for another one of our incredible client success spotlights. And AKEMI is an amazing, just had incredible breakthroughs inside of the program, as you can tell, is like a total light and has had some really incredible wins and celebrations after her up leveling, after our work, after our program together. So before we start and we talk about all of the amazing things that are a part of your life now, I was telling you, I pulled up your application from a year ago when you found us. So can you just give us a high level overview of who was AKEMI a year ago, before you stepped into our world? So what was going on in your life? What drew you to us?
Yeah, and it was even more than a year ago. It was like probably a year and a half or something, because a year ago is sort of when I
Oh
up.
yeah, it was April. It was April
Yeah, it was
2021.
definitely earlier. And it was I was going through like a very um challenging time at work. Work had become very, very all consuming. This was still sort of in the throes of COVID. And so the demands for me at work were really high. It's really an unclear environment. We were in a very small organization, and you know, it was just very difficult to kind of keep up with that. And we were sort of essential workers in the space as well. So there was just like a lot of activity there. And at the same time, I had a daughter at home, who was going to school at home, and then sometimes was in school and sometimes was back out of school because of COVID. And so I was just at this place where I was like, this is not sustainable. And I don't think this is where I want my life to be, where I'm revolving around work and whatever is happening there. And then, trying to buffet my family from COVID. And I felt like I didn't have any time for myself. I didn't really have any time to reflect on anything or do anything outside of work and family. And I needed a reset. So,
Mm.
for me, it was just this realization that I was really burned out, and I was an executive that like have a very successful career, but there was just still something missing because everything that I was doing was in service of
Mm.
my job or my employer and not necessarily in service of me.
Mm. Yeah, I think I love what you just shared, that it wasn't sustainable. Like you were getting the sense that it wasn't sustainable, that work was getting the best of you. And you kind of look around and you're like, I'm successful, right? You've got this like high level executive position, you're making really good money, you got a whole lot of responsibility, and you have sacrificed almost all of your life for your job or your boss or right, the company. And then you said I needed a reset. I've never heard it said like that. I really love that. You knew you were burnt out. How did you know you were burnt out? Because some people find us, and they're like, I'm burned out. And some people are like, well, maybe I'm not. How did you even have that language? Like, how'd you know that's what was going on?
I think just, I mean, frankly, like the amount of time I was spending, on work related activity was just most of my day. I mean, it would start at, six, like meetings might start at 7, but for prep, it might start at like 5 o'clock in the morning for me. Right. And then I'm trying to also figure out how to get my daughter ready for school. And then I'd have my meetings go on until dinner, and then people would
Yeah.
still call me after that. Right. And there was just back to back to back. And so just like physically, I was just like tired. My brain was tired. I was really cranky all the time, and probably cranky to the people who loved me most and that needed me. like my husband, my daughter, my family. And this does not feel good. And I just didn't feel energy,
Yeah.
like positive energy that was sort of buoying me up. I felt very tired and run down.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you said you were working like 70 plus hours a week when you started. So of course, like that was unsustainable and your health was suffering and your relationships are suffering because it's always the family that gets the brunt of that shortness. You show up really great at work and then, okay, so you found us and, we're a year and a half later, you probably graduated about a year ago. We'll talk about what got you to where you are now, but can you just give us a snapshot of where are you now? Like, what have you implemented in your life that you've learned inside of the program and how has that shifted things for you and your family?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in a much better place. So I actually took it's funny because the sparkly breadcrumbs like led me to a job that I wasn't seeking and wasn't planning to take. Actually was going to take time off, and someone came to me and said, "Hey, look, we really need you and your expertise to help us with this program."
Mm.
And I actually decided to take it. It doesn't pay the same that I was making before. It's a different kind of role. It's with a nonprofit, so it's a different kind of corporate structure. But one, I think it is a much better work-life balance for me. Two, it allows me to utilize the 20 years that I have in my industry to help so many people. And there's something in me that like is a calling around being an educator and being a nurturer. And it allowed me to do that and like share what I know with people who are just starting out in the industry. And I think just the I don't know, being able to be present, especially for my family, I think is
Mm.
me like just I think a much better place, than where I was sitting before. And it allows me to also kind of pursue other things and just have some time for me. And then in terms of like things that I've implemented, I actually do a lot more, I don't know, like sort of planning. Like I now have a planner that I sit and like look at and I kind of lay out like what are my goals? Like what is my goal for today? What is my intention for today? What is my big priority? And they're not always like work related. Sometimes they're like, I need to make time for X, Y, or Z. Like I need to make sure I take a walk around the block. Or I need, so there are these other things that I don't think I would have put on my list of to-dos that are
Yep.
than they were, a year and a half ago. They were all work related.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is I love this is part of why you're here and why I wanted to do this interview with you because there's a real thing that happens when we get clear on our priorities, right? And our values, right? And sometimes we figure out how we can stay inside of the job we're in because it's aligned with our values. And sometimes we actually realize we can't, right? And so, I want to acknowledge that what you did, I've watched you do this in so many ways, is take control of your life back, right? And you know this, we start the program and we say, it's not the job. It's not just the job, right? The job may be 50% of the problem and you're the other 50% of the problem. So let's look at what you can control. And sometimes in that, the answer is to leave the job, right? But what's really cool that you're showing everybody is that if you hadn't learned in a way to prioritize your own life, if you had just jumped to another job, right? Do you think you would have repeated the same patterns?
I think it would have been very easy to, and it would have been easy for me to jump to another job that's really similar to what I was doing. And I still get a lot of calls to do something similar to that. But my priorities really have shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And there may be a time and a place for me to do that as well. So I don't discount it. And that's different too, I think. The feeling like my whole self and all the experience I'm bringing to the table is valuable. So So I think that it's a good thing that I had the experience to stop and just be sure I listened to myself before just saying jump to another job that's just the same, another version of kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it did something very different from most of what I've done for my career, but it's adjacent and sort of allows me to use everything that I've learned up until now, and been I think for me just very rewarding. I don't feel like I am not useful or threw away anything that I've learned. It's all been super helpful in this role that I'm in now, and I can help all these other people. So it's a win-win for me.
I mean, I think it's so cool that you're showing people. How long had you been in the other industry?
Like 20 years. I mean, various companies and various roles in companies, but 20 years, launching products and timelines and meeting with retailers and all kinds of stuff. It's hectic.
And like you're showing everybody that it is possible to say, wow, I've done this. Now let me get really clear on my values and let me get really clear on my strengths. You said my whole self is being used and what matters to me. And I love you got clear on that you're an educator and that you're a nurturer and you want to bring your wisdom in ways that your other job wasn't really allowing for that. And you wanted to find something that was in alignment with what's important to you at this phase in your life, right? Your partner and your daughter and, living a little bit more slowly, right? And you were able to do that, right? You were able to do that. And I think that's, people are afraid of that. If a year and a half ago, when you applied to do kind of the burnout work with us, if we had told you that this was possible, like if we were to say, hey, this is what the woman across the river looks like a year and a half from now, would you have ever have imagined that?
I don't know. I mean, it was really, really hard for me to, I think, imagine that. I mean, I even remember I was sitting in the car doing that exercise on my intake call, and I was like, I don't know if I can get there right now. So I mean, I guess I would have enough faith in myself that I would, but it felt very far away.
Do you remember some of the first things you did inside of the program that started to help you realign? Like, what was like one of the first things that made an impact on you, if you can remember?
I mean, these aren't in chronological order. I'm just kind of coming to mind some of the things that were really helpful. Like for sure, like the big rocks exercise was very, very helpful. And even some of the like the inner wise woman work, because I don't know that I always listened to my, like, you have these gut feelings, but I would sort of power through them. And I think even some of that was like just taking time to like listen to myself and sort of talk to myself, like, what you really need, was helpful. And then the other exercise that was really interesting to me, especially as it relates to my new role, is the exercise where we had to ask people around us, like, what do you do well? And I asked like, I don't know, maybe half a dozen people or something, like ask people like, what do I do well? And it was just so lovely to hear people. People were like just very, very kind and genuine in their responses. But there was this theme that came through about me being a connector. Like I connect people and that I'm a nurturer. I care for people. And so it was really interesting to hear those themes, because I felt like, oh, well, these are like things that come, I guess, very naturally to me, because these were people from all different walks of life and from different points in my kind of history. And to have that theme come up really strongly across the board was really kind of interesting. And so funny, because this new role, I very much play a connector and a creator of information and a networker. And it clearly is like playing to some innate strength that I had that I don't think I like leverage.
Oh, yeah. I love it. It's like the little seeds that get planted. And I want to share this with everybody who's listening, because you don't know what these exercises are. These are some of the exercises we take our clients through inside of our core program. But the first two that AKEMI talked about, Big Rocks and Inner Wise Woman, is really learning to get clear on what your priorities are and to get clear on what your intuition, right, is saying. And you said something so amazing. And I think every high achieving woman who is exhausted or overwhelmed or burnt out or on the verge of burnout really understands the sentence you said, I was just powering through. And I know I've been there many times, and every single woman in our community has been here many times. And part of the way that I believe the system keeps women disconnected from their power and great gifts is by keeping us exhausted. Because when you're working 70 hours a week and you've got no time for yourself and no time for reflection and no time to really listen to your body or your intuition, you just stay where you are. You're on the hamster wheel. You're just the cog in the wheel. And so I really just want to celebrate like that you took this bold step to have the call. Sounds like you were in your car when you had your breakthrough call. Which all of you, I'll tell you how you can book a free breakthrough call with our team soon. And then you made that decision and you had no idea how you were going to get to the vision that we helped you see on that call. But you made the space. You made the space, and you have been following these breadcrumbs. And now you can see the role you're in now. You're like, oh, obvious. This is so obvious that my life has been preparing me for this.
Yeah. And it's so crazy. I remember the call I remember thinking the investment, like, man, should I do that? Can I do? And I was making money. So but I'd never spent that much money on myself ever, and I was like, why am I like, shouldn't I be the one that I'm spending that money on instead of everybody else around me? And that like in and of itself, sort of this weird revelation. And there was a power in making that investment in myself, and then wanting the kind of ROI from that investment. I was like, well, I'm all in. I'm going to do this, but I'm all in. And, you can't just sort of like halfway do the program. And I was really glad that I did that. That was a big turning point for me too, to spend that much money on myself.
Thanks for speaking to that, because it's a really important piece that we don't talk about a lot on these interviews. That it's a big investment, and I know what you're talking about. That realization of like, if my roof started leaking, I wouldn't think twice about spending whatever it costs to fix it.
Yeah.
If my child needed a certain amount of education, or if his life, if he needed something, I would do it. We do this for others just without a second thought. And so you saying that of like, whoa, that was empowering in of itself. That was a realization in of itself.
Yeah.
Right. That it took a moment for you to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to give myself permission to do this. And I'm not going to check in with somebody, and I'm not going to, right. And I'm going to notice all the things that come up, and I'm going to put a stake in the ground, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to claim it, and I'm going to go all in.
Yeah.
And I think many women, many of us are afraid to do that because we've been conditioned to give to everybody else and then take the scraps. Right.
Yep.
You had some super cool, amazing news a few months ago that we all got to celebrate with you inside of our alumni group, because you had, and this started before you were in Awaken, this project,
yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And would you like to share? Would you like to share with everybody this celebration?
Yes. So in June this year, I won a
you can just hold it up.
Emmy. We won an Emmy because I had this sort of side interest that I'd been working on since about 2016, where I'd created in partnership with a documentary filmmaker, a short documentary called Three Boys Manzanar. And we had made it about my father, who was interned in the Japanese internment camps in World War II. And he was 8 years old when he went in, and I think 10 when he came out. But he's an famous picture of 3 boys behind barbed wire, and we found the other 2 boys, and they're all in their 80s at that point. And we filmed a reunion, but a reunion that was much more personal and sort of focused on, you know, what it was like to be a child in the camp. And I think the takeaway was not so much preaching about what was right and what was wrong, but to provoke thought about what it means to be a citizen. What are your civil rights? How do we think about racism? How do we think about national security? You know, all of these kinds of questions that can be discussed. And the film was picked up by a PBS station in Sacramento, and they advised us, because it hadn't been shown anywhere else, to apply for an Emmy. And I was like, you know what? We're going to go do it. We applied, and we were told that we were nominated in May, and we went to the award ceremony in June. This is it was because it was a regional program. It is a Northern California regional chapter, but it's still the same statue. And you know, flew out my father, my parents, and we're thrilled when her name. So it was very, very exciting, and you know, just something that I think actually came up in the program, because there is like real generational trauma from it that I had realized, you know, as we were making the film, and hadn't necessarily probably dealt with. And there's, I think, some generational trauma within like the Japanese American community, you know, and sort of Asian diaspora that exists in the US. And so it was just very, very rewarding and an honor to recognize that way. And I was thrilled to, like, I think like the AYL community was like one of the first communities I shared with, and I would like had a picture of me, and I'm like, guys, look what happened.
We're like at the table, we were all like, what?
And so many people reached out, and like it was just like, this community is so incredibly supportive and loving and curious, and they all wanted to see. It was like the best feeling. Like, and people I don't know, but you feel like you know. So it was like,
I want to say the name of the film. So for all of you who want to go watch it, you can. It is Three Boys Mansonar. And you know, I think you're speaking to something. I'm just celebrating you so much, and the legacy, you know, like to make your pain, your father's pain, you know, into art in the way that you have, and to be recognized for it. And I want to speak to that just briefly, because again, you're bringing up new stuff here, AKEMI, that we normally don't talk about on these spotlights, because it's like normally it's like kind of behind the veil, like you see it when you get in the program. But I think what you said is, you talked about intergenerational trauma, ancestral trauma. It's real. And so many, we see this happen, right? I mean, you see it happen with the other women of color in our community, to immigrants. Like I'm a white woman, and my great grandparents all came from, you know, the Middle East. And so there's some part of me way back that experiences this ancestral trauma. And the closer we get to, right, especially your father being in the camp, the women of color in our community, there's a real piece of how that trauma impacts the way we work. And impacts the way we feel about ourselves, right? Am I good enough? Have I proven myself yet? I'm going to work and work and work and work. So then, and we're outrunning something, right? I mean, I think one of the sneaky things that we see a lot in our community, and you know this, is workaholism, right? And just that running on the treadmill again and again to get away from something until we stop and ultimately face it. And so I wanted to elevate that piece that you said, that the intergenerational trauma is real, you know, and why many of us work, and the way that we work, right, is to prove our worthiness, right? To outrun the things that we've been running from, that we don't want to face. And when we're willing to do the really hard work of stopping and looking, we get to create these beautiful lives. And I'm seeing you doing that so beautifully. You say, no, not this, that, not this many hours, that many hours, not this way of leading, the wisdom way of leading, the art, the beauty way. It's just really beautiful to see. Is there one piece of advice you'd like to give any of the women who are watching? We'll just close on this. Maybe they're in the same position you were in a year and a half, 2 years ago, feeling like they're drowning, like, there's no way out. I mean, you said something in your application that I think is worthy to, I want to remind you of.
Yeah.
You said, my health has suffered, physical and mental. I feel so overwhelmed, like I'm furiously treading water and I'm not getting anywhere. And I'm at the risk of drowning at any moment. And then this is what you said that really brought tears to my eyes when I reread it. You said, I also adore my husband, my daughter and my husband, but can't be present with them, even when we're together. And so I just if you were to give advice to that woman, or maybe a woman who's still in that position, what do you want her to know? And what's the first step you want her to take?
Whether you have a family or not, and in this case, I certainly have my husband, my daughter. I also have my parents, my siblings. They're at the end of the day, after all of this, and we live our lives. I think the legacy that we should strive for is that we were kind and giving and compassionate and passionate human beings. And you sort of can't do that unless you are kind and compassionate to yourself, and that you recognize your strengths and your weaknesses, and you have a willingness to confront some of those challenges. And so for me, I think it was important to just stop, that hamster wheel spinning, or that bike wheel spin, and I just needed to put a finger in the spoke and just stop. Stock of like, what really is going to be important. And is it really important that I get this report out, or I take this meeting, or is it more important that I'm here for my daughter or my husband when they really need me? And so, or my parents who are now, in their 80s. I mean, they're not going to be around forever. And so I didn't want to look back and say, boy, I'm so glad I took that meeting, but I missed, some really important moment. And those important moments are really tiny. They're not all the birthdays, that they're little things that were there for somebody in a really, really important way. And I feel like I can do that now, where I kind of couldn't do that before. And so, if you're not sure what to do, or not sure whether it's worth it, think about all of those important people in your lives and what you want your legacy to be, and why do you want people to remember you as a human being, and know that you are worth investing in. It is worth investing in you and your health and your mental well-being, so that you can be the best person you can be for all of those other people around you. Because you just, if you don't, you don't have anything left to give, right? I mean, you say it in the program, like, fill your bucket first, because you can't fill up anyone else's bucket unless you've got something in yours to give.
Thank you so much, AKEMI. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you for shining your beautiful light in the world and making really hard decisions that turned out to be really easy decisions to live an aligned life. And so I love you. I love having you in this community, and I'm so grateful that you took the time today. For those of you who are wanting to hit the reset button, if you feel like we just need to put that finger in the hamster wheel and just like get it to stop for a second. Your first step, just like AKEMI's first step, is to book a breakthrough call with our team. It's totally free. It's an hour of your time with one of our amazing trained breakthrough coaches, and we'll get super clear on what's not working and what you want your life to look like. We'll take you through that same cool exercise that we took AKEMI through, so you get to see yourself on the other side of the river a year from now. And if we can help you get there, we'll tell you how. There's no pressure in any way. If we don't feel like we're the right fit, we'll tell you that too. And you can book that by going to endtheburnout.com/apply, endtheburnout.com/apply. And AKEMI, I'm celebrating you. I think we have an alumni call on Wednesday. I'll be there. So I hope to see you on our next alumni call. And thank you for taking the time to be with all of us and sharing your love and your wisdom.
Thank you so much. And thank you for everything that you've done for me and all of the women in the program. It's an incredible program.
Much love.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.